Hello, my name is Mr. Chipman, and I teach biology and AP biology at Murray High School in Murray, Kentucky. This is 4.3, Soil Composition and Properties. Looking at how soil is composed, in the last video we looked at the formation of soil and erosion. We're going to look at the composition of soil. I love this picture. I just like fun graphs or models that sort of show a lot of different things and can be read in lots of different ways. And this is a pretty commonly used graph. So we're going to be looking at this idea of water holding capacity. I think we all understand this concept. You can think of a sponge versus like a towel, right? And one of them can hold more water than the other, and there's different reasons why they can do that, right? Versus a paper towel versus a piece of paper, right? And so soil is very much that way as well. Different kinds of soil are going to have more or less capacity to hold water and nutrients, right? And that has to do with the mixture of different types of soil in that. And so clay is different than silt, is different than sand. And then as you mix those things, you get all sorts of different things. You get sorts of different combos, and those combos can have different properties, right? And so before we talk about porosity, we're going to look at the different kinds of soil. So you have clay. Clay is very small particles, right? It's a high surface area to volume ratio. We've talked about how surface area to volume in biology. So very small particles, very high surface area, lots of stuff touching it. We learned about clay as part of that layer of the soil that's starting to be filtered out, right? And the different minerals are going into it. So high mineral content, very high water retention because of this, and very low drainage, right? It holds lots of water and it doesn't drain very easily. If you think of clay, you understand how clay feels, right? It doesn't feel like it would let go very much, but hold a lot, right? Sand is very large particles comparatively to clay, low surface area to volume, so very low water retention and very high drainage, sort of the opposite, right? Doesn't do well at holding nutrients. Silt has sort of intermediate properties, meaning it's in between those two. And so higher, and this is important to understand when you talk about fertility of the ground, higher water retention is going to equal greater fertility, right? Because plants need water. However, they also need air. They need some of the stuff that comes from air, and very important. And too much water can cause water logging, which can cause rot and fungal growth and that sort of thing, which you don't want. And so there has to be a good mix between clay and sand and silt to bring it all together into a loamy sort of thing. I like the word loam, so I just had to say it. So let's look at these concepts. Porosity is a very important concept with soil. This is the amount of pore space between soil particles, right? Smaller particles are going to allow less space, which should make sense, right? Whereas larger particles are going to have more space in between them. So sand has a lot of porosity, whereas clay has less porosity. Permeability, this is how easy water is able to pass through. Water is able to pass through gravel, as you can see, very quickly, right? Because gravel's big particles, lots of space, lots of porosity in gravel, whereas clay takes a lot more time for the water to filter through that, right? In fact, it just maybe doesn't, right? And you have silt there, and you can see the picture. You can make sense of that picture without me talking through it. You get the idea, right? So permeability is water's ability to pass through. And then fertility is all of these things combined. So it's nutrient content. Plants need nutrients, right? Nitrogen, phosphorus, other things. They also need water in order to do cellular function, metabolism. And so fertility is a mix of those two things. Soil's ability to hold nutrients, to allow nutrient-type living things, bacteria, fungi, things that create nutrient availability for plants by decomposing organic material. So they need air, right? So there needs to be some aeration in the soil. And water content. So fertility is a mix of all of those things. And this brings us to this concept of soil texture. So here's the same graph again, it's just a little bit different, right? Sandier soils tend to have a higher permeability, which we've talked about, and this is going to lower their fertility. Now, some plants are able to grow in sandy soils, which we know. Clay soils, low permeability, high nutrient retention, poor drainage. Some plants are able to grow in clay really well, but aren't able to grow, or some plants aren't able to grow in clay because of just location, right? And then loam. Loam is just a mix of these things. You can kind of see that there in the middle of them. It's a balanced mix of sand, clay, and silt. This is the best kind of soil for agriculture because it's sort of the best of all of the worlds. You put it all together, and you have the best of all the worlds. This is the kind of soil that we have in southeast Missouri. You have soil being deposited from the Mississippi River over the course of many, many hundreds of years, and you have the clay there, and you have, it's just all this great mix, great agriculture, some of the best soil in the entire world because of that sort of mixture. River valleys tend to have this sort of thing a lot more than other places. This brings us to the idea of soil testing. So this guy's taking core samples of the soil in order to test it for different things. There are different ways to test soil. There's physical tests like you see this individual doing. Did this sort of work one summer. Fantastic fun times. This tests for texture. It tests for the amount of water filtration. So like some soybeans there. Good times. You can do chemical tests, which test for pH, because different plants need different kinds of pH. You can test for nutrients, is what you kind of see here. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all things that plants need. If the soil has a lot of that, that soil is more likely to grow, right? If it doesn't have a lot of that, then farmers oftentimes use fertilizer, which contains those things, which is this whole other lesson. You can do biological testing, which I don't think I have a picture for, presence of things like microbes and earthworms and other organisms that promote fertility. There's a lot of different ways to test the soil and test it for nutrients and the availability of plants being able to grow. Let's look at some examples. Cactuses, great example. They grow in deserts that have sandy soil that drain rapidly. It limits the soil's ability to hold water, and so what do cactuses do really well? They hold water, right? So they've sort of adapted to this area. The desert represents an area that hadn't otherwise been exploited, and so you'd expect to see a plant that's really good at being able to live there and not live other places. Great example. And here's cotton. Loamy, this is Midwest. This is my territory where I grew up. Southern, of course, the southern areas have cotton as well, but I always think of my home when I see a cotton plant. And loamy soils, high crop productivity, some of the highest in the world because of the soil's just perfect mixture there. Let's look at a practice problem. A farmer wants to test which soil type best supports water retention for crops. She fills 3 identical containers with sand, silt, and clay, adds 500 mils of water to each, and measures the volume of water that drains out after 24 hours. Which feature of this experiment best allows her to compare soil water holding capacity? All right, so let's look. This is more an experimental design question. It's fine, though. We don't mind those. The farmer uses 3 different soil types in this experiment. Maybe. But this doesn't really allow her to compare soil capacity. Water that drains out is collected in separate beakers. Each container receives the same initial water volume. Okay, so this one ensures that all 3 trials are going to be tested equally, right? If you put different amounts in there, you don't know how much is being retained. Almost said retended, weird word, retained. And so I think C is the best answer. Let's look at D. The experiments conducted, no, definitely C. C is the best answer. I hope these videos are helpful for you. Let me know. Let me know if you have questions. Leave me a comment. Thank you for watching.